Hello from Jerusalem and welcome to Watchmen Talk, a series of conversations with Israeli military and security experts and practitioners. Our guest today is Brigadier General and Dr. Tarif Bader, who until very recently has been the Surgeon General or Chief Medical Officer of the Israeli Defense Forces and is now about to begin his civilian career as the Director General of one of Israel's largest regional hospitals, Kaplan, not far from Rehovot. And by the way, Kaplan is named after the first Israeli finance ministry, which only goes to tell you that money is very important in this regard. General Bader, Dr. Bader, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Our conversation has to tie three strands regarding your background and career. All of them start with M in addition to the money, which we mentioned. And these are medical, military, and minority. You come from the Druze village of Hurfeish in the Upper Galilee, a mountaintop in Israeli terms village. And we would first like to explain to our viewers, especially abroad, what is the Druze community? What are the traditions? What is the difference between a Druze and an Arab? And just to enlighten our viewers, 1 in 5 Israelis is an Arab, either Muslim or Christian. 1 in 65 Israelis is a Druze. There are approximately 140,000 Druze Israelis. So what is a Druze?
Thank you very much. You mentioned Druze and you mentioned minority, and it's not a secret that I lived in a situation that I'm always in the minority side. The Druze is a minority in Israel. The Druze is a minority in between the Arab population in Israel. And I'm starting with the Arab population because the Druze religion is actually is derived from the Arab population. My mother's tongue is an Arabic. And actually the Druze is a newly religion established almost 1,400 years ago. And it's derived from the Muslims. We believe in one God. We have our own prophets, and we, of course, respect all other prophets that exist. Our religion is a secret religion, and we believe that there was an opportunity for almost all people to join the Druze, and who decided to join the Druze religion are Druze now, and who decided not to join it, they are not allowed to be Druze. And actually, this is one of the religions that it's a one-way ticket. That means you can decide not to be a Druze if you decide, for example, that you do not want this, but there is no option that you can join the religion. So there was an opportunity 1,400 years ago to join this religious, and if you didn't do this, so actually you passed the opportunity.
So it's a very exclusive club, and most of the Druze settlements, villages, towns in the Druze community in Israel are on top of mountains or hills, and that obviously comes from the fact that in centuries past, under different regimes, different empires, your ancestors were besieged and wanted to take the high ground, and they were also very fierce fighters.
Actually, that's right. When we are talking about the period before the State of Israel, the Druze as a minority has to fight, has to protect themselves, and this is one of the reasons that they choose to have their own houses in the hills. It's much easier. I'm talking about as a military person. It's much easier to protect your house when you are on the top of the village. And that's right. That if you see the Druze villages in Israel, most of them are either in mountains or in hills in the northern part of Israel, from the Carmel mountain where there are two villages of the Druze population, Osafia and Dalia, until the upper north of Israel, where my village is. And actually, it's one of the northest villages in Israel. And actually, this is one of the things that we used to do. It's not a secret that in the last, let's say, 70 or 80 years, we are not dealing with protecting ourselves. We are living in Israel, and it's safe. Even though we are still minority in Israel, but we are, let's say, that we have to focus in other things and not in protecting ourselves. And that's probably one of the reasons that more and more people are leaving the countries, leaving the villages, and moving to towns and other places in Israel.
So you were born and raised in Hurfeish. Yeah. Later on, much later on, you were the medical officer of the brigade in the area, actually taking care of your own village as well as others. But you were born in 1967, which means that when you were a teenager, there was no longer a problem in Druze officers becoming very senior officers. The first colonels were appointed of the Druze community, even though there were lieutenant colonels earlier, full colonels only from the early 80s on. So what made you decide to go for not only the medical profession, but to do it as part of a cadet program for the military, which upon commissioning and graduation from medical school means that you are in the IDF for a career?
First of all, I believed in myself. And I believed that I wanted to be a physician. And I wanted to be a physician as soon as possible. And this is probably one of the reasons that I joined the cadets. And actually, in the age of 24, I was already graduated as a physician. And you mentioned, it's not a secret that whenever you are studying before the military, you have to join the military as a physician. This is what I did. And if you ask me in 1993, when I joined the military, if I have my career, all the 30 years almost, as a physician, as a military physician, I'm not sure. But I wanted to be the best that I can in every position that I am. So that's the reason that as a soldier, I get an extra excellence, and I was chosen to be one of the infantry brigades, not in the battalion where the Druze are serving, but in another one in Golani. And actually, let's say by the time when I passed from one position to the other, and first of all, I joined what I did. I enjoyed what I did. I did it wonderful. I got a lot of excellence letters and from my commanders and from my colleagues. And probably that's the reason that I wanted to continue in the military.
But you also grew up in a security environment. Yeah. Your father was a police or border patrol officer. The border patrol is part of the police. Yeah. And there are relatively many Druze officers in the military, in the police, in the prison service. What sort of impact did your father's career leave upon you?
I'm sure that there is an impact on my career and my brother's career from the environment that we lived in. You mentioned my father. I have a lot of cousins and relatives who were serving them in the military. My uncle also was one of the lieutenant colonels, the first lieutenant colonels in the military. My father served almost 25 years in the police. So it wasn't strange for us serving in the military. And seeing this uniform and seeing the ranks, so I'm sure that it's much easier for a person like me who is living in an environment that these things are not strange, to be more familiar with that and actually to try to do the same.
You specialized in as a pediatrician.
Yeah.
What is the relationship of taking care of babies and infants and being a medical officer in the army?
First of all, you have to understand that even in the military, there are a lot of children.
We're not talking about childish commanders, but children.
No, children. This is one of the fantastic things in the medical corps, that whenever you decide to stay in the military, you can choose whatever specialized you want to do. And you have to understand that serving the military is for 25, 30 years, and after that you continue to be a physician. So if I like, for example, being a pediatrician, it's okay to have a pause of only 25 years, and later on you have to continue your clinical career. So this is what we decided in the military, not in my period, but much earlier than that. That for the officers who decide to continue serving in the military, in the medical corps, they can decide whatever specialized you want. Of course, we have some of the specialized that we need as the medical corps. For example, we are talking about COVID. We are living in the COVID right now. So we need that part of our physicians go to a specialized, for example, in the epidemiology or in public health. We need that part of them go to surgery. We need that part of them go to orthopedics. What's the need for pediatrician in the military? I'm not sure. Even though in what we call in the clinical units, we need people or physicians who are familiar with the childhood diseases, because part of them are actually moving to the military.
And later on, when you were in charge of the humanitarian aid and the hospital for refugees from Syria, of course, many of them did come with
Absolutely.
babies, and we'll get to that. But General Bader, as your first assignment, you mentioned Golani, the 13th
Yeah.
Battalion, a very distinguished unit, at one time led by former Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot and others. You don't only stay in the back at headquarters waiting for the unit to come back from operations. You join it on missions, sometimes behind enemy lines, and as a relatively old, as you said, 24, 25 officer, you are the commander's right-hand man on other matters too. So what was the experience of being an infantry medical officer?
It was an amazing period. It's one of the most beautiful periods that I have served in the military. It's very important that I believe and my colleagues believe that the morale of the soldiers in the fighting zone is dependent in the fact that they believe that if they are wounded, they have some people who can take care of them. And that's the reason that you mentioned the period that we went, for example, to South Lebanon and other places. It's very important to understand that whenever the soldiers understand that in the environment, in the relative environment, there is a physician, there are medics who can take the care of them, it's very important. And it's not a secret that the physician is almost at the age of the commanders of the brigade, of the battalion. And actually, it's also very important to understand that there is a young guy, clever most of the time, that can watch what is happening there. So it's very important, not only for me as a physician, but also for the soldiers and for the morale of them.
What are the principles or protocols of medical evacuation? You are trying to take the wounded as fast as possible out of the killing zone and take care of them a few kilometers from there? Are you trying to helicopter them to a better equipped hospital?
The main issue is to save as many lives as we can and to prevent preventable deaths at the field. So you have to do all the best to ensure this. And sometimes you have to treat them at the area, at the point of injury. And sometimes you have to take only few things to do there, and then evacuate them as soon as possible. It depends on the situation where what is happening there. In general, let's say that we are first of all we're trying to save their lives, and of course we are trying not to endanger the other lives of the other soldiers. So it depends on the situation, depends on the injury itself. There are some of the injuries that you have to do an immediate intervention in order to save the lives of the soldier.
According to professional studies, the Israeli Defense Forces, the medical corps, and the combat units have improved the ratio of wounded, badly wounded, and others to those saved over the years. Is there any statistic data on it?
Yeah, actually, if you are trying to count the soldiers who died in the battlefield, from the whole number of the soldiers who were injured, you see that this ratio is dropping down. It started from about 50% in the independent world. That means that 1 in 2 soldiers who were injured were killed in the battlefield. Until recently, in the last conflict in Gaza, we reached less than 10%. That means less than 10% of the soldiers who were injured were killed in the battlefield. And it's an amazing improvement that you see the sharp decline in the numbers of the soldiers who were killed. That happened, first of all, because of actually we learned a lot about the battlefield. We learned how to protect ourselves. We are talking about the helmets. We are talking the protective vests, and etc. And of course, it's talking about the fact that in the modern battlefields there are medics, paramedics, and physicians at the point of injury. And the sooner we are trying to treat or starting to treat the casualties, the better chances that we can save their lives.
But does it also, Dr. Bader, have to do with relatively simple means like tourniquets? People lost blood irreversibly in earlier conflicts, and now they can be saved?
It's a wonderful question and wonderful statement. Actually, most of the things that we can do in the battlefield are not done by physicians. And that's the reason that we renamed the soldiers from, we call it once a first aid giver. And now we call him a lifesavers. Because we believe that putting a tourniquet in a wound, in a soldier can save their lives. And that's the reason that actually all the fighters in the last few years are taught how to be a lifesavers. That means how to recognize the injury and how to react immediately, even before the medic, the paramedic, or the physician are in the scenario. So there is an important rule for the fighters themselves, and that's the reason that all the fighters have to learn what to do in these situations.
What about mental health? Obviously, some of the mental health practitioners are not even in the medical corps. They are trained as social workers. Yeah. But some are psychologists or psychiatrists. How does the Israeli Defense Force contend with what was once called battle fatigue, shell shock, but we now know is a very natural phenomenon of trauma and post-trauma?
We have to understand that mental health or mental preparedness or mental treatment is part of the whole situation that we have. In the medical corps, there is a huge department of mental health workers. That's right that most of them are social workers, but they are part of the medical corps. They are going with the same bench of the medical corps, and they are working side by side with the physicians and with the commanders. And this is one important thing, that we believe that the mental health preparedness starts not after the injury, but even before the injury. So that's the reason that the mental workers are working with the commanders to prepare the soldiers for the day of the fight. And when there's an injury, we have to take care not only for the physical problem, but also for the mental problem. We saw, for example, that during the soldiers who were injured, almost 30% of them are suffering from mental problems. So we have to take in account that beside treating them, either in the clinics, in the hospital, or whatever, we have to take also for the mental problems.
General Bader, you were in charge of taking care of the casualties of the Syrian Civil War.
Yeah.
This was a very innovative and bold initiative on the part of the Israeli Defense Forces at the border on the Golan Heights with Syria. What can you tell us about it?
It wasn't my first humanitarian mission. A couple of years before that, I was in Haiti as a pediatrician in the Israel delegation. And actually, the humanitarian missions in the state of Israel is not as strange. But this unique mission was, for the first time, actually, we are giving humanitarian mission on a hostile border. And we are dealing with people that actually they are, let's say, they're our enemy. And we decided to do so because we couldn't stay aside and do nothing when we saw these Syrians. Part of them were killed, were severely injured, and actually that's the reason that once it was in February 2013 for the first time that a couple of Syrians who were severely injured decided to go to the, as they said, to the west. Seeking for treatment, and actually, in their point of view, they have no other options, either to stay there and to die, or to go to the border seeking for treatment. And I'm very proud of the fact that our teams, as they were taught all the time, that whenever there's a wounded, you have to treat them, regardless of the fact if he is or she is tourist or citizen or soldier or whatever. And actually, they were treated just on the border. And they were evacuated to Ziv Hospital, which is the nearest hospital to the border. And they were treated. And I can tell you for sure that at least part of them, their lives were saved due to our treatment on the border and in the hospital. And since that point, we decided actually to establish a field hospital just on the border. And it worked almost a year. On off, it depends on the amount of the wounded on the other side, and I can tell you that in total more than 5,000 Syrians were treated in Israel, either on the border, on the hospitals. We started with Ziv, and later on in Haria Hospital also.
So while that was not the reason, they became goodwill ambassadors upon coming back and telling their neighbors that the Israelis are not the demons that they were.
I believe that at least these 5,000 Syrians who were treated in Israel and their lives were saved in Israel, these 5,000 and their families, I'm sure that they are good ambassadors for Israel. Whether they are going to fight with us against Syria, I'm not sure, but at least they are better neighbors.
Most of the indigenous population on the Golan Heights, those who did not live in 1967, are Druze. And there is also an important Druze village on the slope of Hermon.
Yeah.
And there was a problem between some of the inhabitants of these villages and the Syrians who were brought in for treatment. How did you take care of that problem?
For me, it wasn't an issue. And why this? Because I said more than once that whenever you put your stethoscope on your shoulders, it doesn't matter if it's a real stethoscope or you imagine your stethoscope in your shoulder, you have to treat the victim as a human being. And this is what I did. This is what my soldiers did, whether they were Jewish or Druze. And this is the way we act during this issue. It's not a secret that not all my colleagues from the Druze population in Israel were agreed with me but I was very satisfied with what I did. I think I did the right thing, that when there is a need for us, we were there. And I act as a physician, as a commander, and what I suppose from my soldiers and my colleagues to do.
In the very short time that we have left, 2 points. One, when you participate in planning an operation, is it mission first, no matter the casualties? And the other, how did you prepare for COVID, and did Israel prepare in the right way, or should it have employed the medical corps more?
2 big questions. I start with the first one. The mission first, that's right, but you have to put on the table of the commander what are the prices that he or all of us have to pay for that. And I think that our commanders are understand that even they are very minded for the mission, they have to take into account that for the price that we as a population, we as citizens have to pay for that. And I can tell you that sometimes we are changing the operation or postponing the operation because the dangerous on the soldiers is very, very high.
And that's for COVID?
And for COVID, it's a new situation. And I think one of the things that we have to understand that we do not know everything about new things. That means you have to understand, you have to learn, you have to talk with your colleagues either in Israel or abroad, and this is what we did. Whether the state of Israel used the military corps, the medical corps, in the wonderful issue, I'm not sure, but you have to take into account that when we are talking about humanitarian mission and when you are talking about field hospitals, there was a talk about why the state of Israel are not using the field hospital as part of the solution. It's not a good solution in this situation. A field hospital are most of the physicians working in the field hospital are reserve physicians actually who are working in the hospital. So it wasn't a logical thing to take these physicians from the hospitals and put in the field hospital.
Brigadier General Dr. Tarif Bader, one of the only dozen major generals and brigadier generals from the Druze community in the Israeli Defense Forces throughout its history, the former Surgeon General of the IDF, and very soon in charge of Kaplan Hospital in Rehovot, Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.